Captain Yoon Siren stepped through the breach in the station's hull and entered. Kethera 7, for the first time, she had watched the assault from the bridge of the Relentless Dawn, coordinating her Marines and directing fire support where needed. But now the fighting was nearly over, and there was one final task that required her personal attention: the corridors. She walked through showed the evidence of what her people had accomplished. Veloci bodies lay where they had fallen, dragged to the sides by Marines who had cleared the path for the evacuation of prisoners. And the walls were scarred with the marks of weapons fire. Captain Yoon stepped over a dead guard without looking down and continued toward the command center. Communications officer Jang Suyin walked beside her, carrying a portable transmission unit that was already broadcasting everything they saw to the Veloci Consortium's headquarters across the sector. This was not just a rescue operation, it was a message. Captain Lieutenant Beak reported over the comm channel. The command center is secured. We have the primary target in custody, along with 6 surviving crew members. Understood. I am on my way. Yoon climbed the final staircase and emerged into the corridor outside the command center, where a squad of Marines stood guard with weapons ready. They parted to let her through, and she entered the room where Overseer Kralvex waited. The Veloci leader was on his knees in the center of the chamber, his hands bound behind his back with restraints that glowed faintly blue. His scales had turned a sickly gray color, which you knew indicated extreme stress in his species, and his eyes darted around the room looking for any possibility of escape. There was none. Secondary Overseer Mechthel knelt beside him, along with the other survivors of the station's command staff, all of them waiting to learn their fate. Overseer Kralvex, Yoon said, her voice flat and emotionless. I am Captain Yoon Sirin of the Earth Defense Fleet destroyer Relentless Dawn. Kralvex looked up at her, and despite his fear, there was still a spark of defiance in his eyes. You have attacked a protected installation of the Veloci Consortium, he said. This is an act of war, and you will face consequences from the galactic authorities. Yoon did not respond to his threat. Instead, she turned to Officer Jang. Is the transmission active? Yes, Captain. We are broadcasting to all Consortium military and civilian channels across the sector. Good. She turned back to Kralvex and studied him for a long moment before speaking again. 407 Marathi refugees were being held in your facility, she said, including 112 children under the age of majority. All of them captured from a transport vessel that was fleeing a civil war in their home system. Kralvex said nothing. Your records indicate that you intended to sell these individuals to mining colonies in the outer reaches, where the average life expectancy for slave laborers is less than 5 years. Still nothing. The children were to be sold separately to buyers who specialize in what your files euphemistically call companion services. Yoon's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had changed. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Kralvex straightened as much as his bound position would allow. I demand diplomatic immunity under the terms of the Galactic Commerce Accords, he declared. As a registered agent of the Veloci Consortium, I am entitled to legal representation and a formal hearing before any interstellar court. The Veloci Consortium refused to sign the Sapient Rights Accords, Yoon replied, which means your organization has no legal standing under the laws that protect sapient beings from enslavement. That does not give you the right to attack us. Perhaps not. Yoon drew her sidearm and checked the power cell before continuing. But humanity made a promise to itself after we abolished slavery on our own world. A promise written in blood and suffering, and the memory of millions who lived and died in chains. She looked down at Kralvex with eyes that held no mercy. We promised that wherever we found slavery, we would end it, and wherever we found slavers, we would end them as well. You cannot do this, Kralvex said, his voice rising in panic. This is murder. This is against every law of civilized space. This is justice. The shot echoed through the command center. And Overseer Kralvex collapsed without another word. Mechthel and the other prisoners flinched away from the body, their eyes wide with terror as Captain Yoon turned to face them. "You participated in the operation of this facility," she said. "You knew what was happening here, and you did nothing to stop it." "Please," Mechthel whispered. "I was just following orders." "I did not have any choice. There is always a choice." She raised her weapon again. In the medical bay that the Marines had established in one of the cleared sections of the station, Dar Choi Yunwoo worked frantically to stabilize the most seriously injured refugees. Some of them had been beaten by their captors. Others had been denied food and water for days. And a few showed signs of injuries that Dr. Choi did not want to think about too closely. He had seen the worst that sentient beings could do to each other during his years of service. But it never got easier. A young Marathi child lay on the table in front of him, her small body covered in bruises and her breathing shallow and weak. "Stay with me," he murmured as he worked. "You are safe now, I promise. Just stay with me." His hands moved with practiced precision, administering medication and treating wounds while his assistants prepared more patients for transport to the ship. The sound of a gunshot echoed from somewhere in the station, followed by another and another. Dr. Choi did not look up from his work. He knew what those sounds meant. And while part of him wished there was another way, a larger part understood why it had to be done. These slavers would never face justice in any galactic court. The laws were too weak, the enforcement too corrupt, and the Veloci Consortium too powerful for any meaningful punishment to ever be delivered through official channels. So humanity delivered its own punishment and recorded every moment to make sure the galaxy understood what would happen to anyone who followed the same path. The child on his table opened her eyes and looked up at him with an expression of confusion. "Where am I?" she asked weakly. "You are on a human ship," Dr. Choi replied with a gentle smile. "And you are going somewhere safe, I promise. The bad ones? They cannot hurt you anymore." She closed her eyes and relaxed, finally allowing herself to believe that the nightmare was over. Dr. Choi finished his work and moved to the next patient, his hands never stopping, his focus never wavering behind him. The last of the gunshots faded into silence, and the station fell quiet except for the sounds of refugees being guided toward the docking bays and the ships that would carry them to freedom. The cleansing was complete. The relentless dawn pulled away from Cathara 7 as the station burned behind them. Captain Yoon had ordered the facility destroyed after the last refugee was evacuated, leaving nothing but wreckage and ashes where the slaving operation had once thrived. In the cargo bays that had been converted into temporary shelters, 407 Marathi refugees huddled together and tried to process what had happened to them. They had been captured, imprisoned, and prepared for sale to the highest bidder. And then humans had appeared from the darkness and turned their captors into corpses. It was difficult to know how to feel about that elder. The Sani sat apart from the others, wrapped in a thermal blanket that one of the human crew members had given her, watching the activity around her with tired eyes. The humans moved through the shelters with quiet efficiency, distributing food and water and medical supplies while speaking in soft voices that seemed designed not to startle the traumatized refugees. They were so gentle. How could creatures capable of such violence be so impossibly gentle? A human woman approached her with a cup of something warm, and the Sani accepted it with trembling hands. "It is a drink we call tea," the woman explained. "It will help you relax." "Thank you." The woman nodded and moved on to help others. And the Sani sipped the strange liquid and felt its warmth spread through her body. It was good. She was still sitting there when Captain Yoon entered the cargo bay an hour later, no longer wearing her combat armor but dressed in a simple uniform that made her look Almost ordinary, almost there was still something in the way she moved. A predatory grace that marked her as dangerous, even without weapons or armor. The captain made her way through the shelter, stopping to speak with refugees and check on the wounded, before finally reaching the corner where the Sani waited. "May I sit with you, Elder?" she asked. Of course. Yoon lowered herself to the floor beside the old Marathi and sat in silence for a moment, her eyes distant. "I wanted to tell you that we will be arriving at a refugee processing station in approximately 6 hours," she said finally. "The authorities there will help your people find new homes. And there are organizations that specialize in reuniting families that were separated during transit." The Sani nodded slowly. "Captain, may I ask you something?" "Of course. How can you do what you did and then be here now, speaking to me, as if you did not just kill dozens of people with your own hands?" Yoon was quiet for a long time before answering. "Do you know the history of my species, Elder?" "Only what the information networks tell us. That you come from a dangerous world, and that you are feared by many in the galaxy. We are feared because we are capable of great violence." Yoon agreed. "But we are capable of that violence because we evolved on a world where everything wanted to kill us, where survival required strength and speed, and a willingness to fight for our lives every single day." She turned to look at the Sani with eyes that held something ancient and fierce. But that same world also taught us something else. Something that most species do not understand about us. Why is that? It taught us to protect what we love. Yoon's voice softened. Humans did terrible things to each other throughout our history, including enslaving our own kind for thousands of years. And when we finally ended that practice, we swore that we would never allow it to happen again. But the slavers were not human. That does not matter. The captain shook her head. "When we look at your people, Elder, we do not see aliens or strangers or beings that are different from us. We see children who deserve to grow up free, and families who deserve to stay together, and individuals who deserve to choose their own path through life." She paused. "And when we see someone trying to take those things away, something very old and very powerful wakes up inside us. Something that will not stop until the threat is eliminated." The Sani considered this for a moment. "So you are terrible because you are kind?" Yes. The answer was simple and honest, and it explained everything. These humans had not attacked the station out of cruelty or a desire for conquest. They had attacked because they could not bear to see innocent beings suffer, because their own history had taught them what slavery truly meant, and because they had the power to stop it. "What will happen now?" the Sani asked. "The Veloci Consortium will be angry about what you did." "Let them be angry," Yoon smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "We broadcast everything that happened today to every consortium channel in the sector, including the contents of the station's files that documented their slaving operations. And by now the recording has spread across half the galaxy. You wanted others to see. We wanted others to understand." The captain stood and looked down at the old Marathi with something like respect in her eyes. "The Veloci can threaten and protest all they want, but they know what will happen if they try to retaliate. And so does every other species that profits from the slave trade. What will happen? More of us will come." She turned to leave, then paused. "Get some rest, Elder. You have been through a terrible ordeal, and you deserve peace." The Sani watched her go, thinking about everything she had learned across the galaxy. The broadcast from Kethra 7 was spreading through communication networks like fire through dry grass. Diplomats protested, merchants complained, and military commanders argued about the implications of what the humans had done. But in the dark places where slavers operated, in the hidden stations and secret markets where sapient beings were bought and sold like cargo, a different kind of conversation was happening. They were talking about the humans, about the recording that showed Deathworlders, cutting through defenses like they were nothing, executing slavers without hesitation, and then treating their rescued captives with a tenderness that seemed impossible from such violent creatures. High Coordinator Veltrix of the Veloci Consortium watched the recording 3 times before issuing a single order to all Consortium operations near human space. Cease all activities immediately and withdraw. Not because he had experienced a moral awakening, but because he had seen what humans did to slavers, and he had no desire to see it happen to anyone else under his command. Ambassador No Yaram received 17 formal protests in the hours after the broadcast, and she responded to each one with the same simple message. We answered a distress call. We found slavers, and there are no more slavers. When pressed for further explanation, she simply provided documentation of what had been happening and Cathra 7 and invited the protesting parties to explain why they were defending people who sold children. None of them had an answer. On the relentless dawn, the refugees slept peacefully for the first time in days, surrounded by humans who would die before allowing any harm to come to them. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other distress signals were being transmitted by other victims of other predators. Each one a cry for help that echoed through the void. The humans were listening, and mercy for those who preyed on the innocent was nowhere to be found. The corridors of Kethra 7 had become a hunting ground, and the hunters wore human faces. Sergeant Major Quan Taijin led his fire team through the lower levels of the station, clearing each section with methodical efficiency, while the sounds of combat echoed from other parts of the complex. The Veloci had attempted to establish defensive positions at several choke points, but human marines did not attack the way other species expected. They did not advance in neat formations or pause to assess enemy strength. They flowed through the corridors like water finding cracks in stone, appearing from unexpected angles, striking with overwhelming force, and moving on before the defenders could regroup. Quan had been doing this for 12 years, ever since his first deployment against pirates in the outer colonies, and he had learned that speed and violence were more effective than caution against enemies who preyed on the weak. A Veloci guard stumbled out of a side door, weapon raised, and Quan shot him twice in the chest without breaking stride. Keep moving, he ordered his team. The holding cells are 2 levels down. Corporal Shin Yanhee followed close behind, her rifle sweeping left and right as they advanced, her breathing steady despite the chaos around her. She had expected to feel fear during her first real combat operation, but what she felt instead was a cold clarity that made everything seem sharper and more immediate. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of movement registered in her awareness with perfect precision. This was what human soldiers were bred for. What millions of years of evolution on a world filled with predators had created. They were not just fighters. They were apex predators in body armor. The team reached a stairwell and descended rapidly, checking each landing before continuing down into the depths of the station. The air grew warmer as they dropped lower, and a faint smell began to reach them through their helmet filters. It was the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Of fear and desperation and hopelessness. Shin felt something tighten in her chest as she recognized what it meant. We are getting close, Private Moon said quietly, his voice flat and controlled. They emerged into a long corridor lined with heavy doors, each one sealed with electronic locks that glowed red in the dim lighting. Through the small windows in each door, faces stared out at them with wide eyes and trembling bodies. Marathi refugees, hundreds of them, packed into cells designed for a fraction of their number. Quan approached the first door and looked inside, and what he saw made his jaw clench hard enough that Shin could hear his teeth grinding. Children. The cell was filled with Marathi children, separated from their parents and packed together like cargo in a shipping container. Some of them were crying silently, Too exhausted or too frightened to make any sound, others simply stared at nothing. Their eyes empty and hollow. Corporal Shin, Quan said, his voice carefully controlled. Begin unlocking the cells. We are getting these people out of here. Shin moved to the control panel beside the first door and began working on the electronic lock while Moon covered the corridor. The lock clicked open within seconds, and the door swung inward to reveal the terrified faces of the children inside. It is okay, Shin said softly. Switching to Galactic Common, we are here to help you. No one is going to hurt you anymore. A small girl at the front of the group stared up at her with huge eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. Are you the monsters? She whispered. Shin felt something crack inside her heart. No, little one. We are the ones who hunt the monsters. She helped the children out of the cell and moved to the next door while Moon kept watch, and Quan coordinated with the other teams via his communicator one by one. The cells opened and the prisoners emerged into the corridor, blinking in the light and looking at their rescuers with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Elder Dasani was in the third cell, her frail body pressed against the wall by the crowd of adults packed in around her. She had been the leader of the refugee convoy before the Veloci attacked, and she had watched helplessly as her people were herded into cages and told they would spend the rest of their lives as slaves. Now she stepped into the corridor and saw the human Marines standing guard with their weapons ready, their faces hidden behind dark visors that reflected the dim lights. They were terrifying. Everything about them radiated danger, from the way they moved to the way they held their weapons to the absolute stillness of their posture when they were not actively in motion, but they were opening the cells. They were freeing her. People of Veloci Guard appeared at the far end of the corridor, weapon raised to fire into the crowd of refugees. And Elder Dasani did not even have time to scream before one of the humans put a single shot through his head. The guard dropped, and the human who had fired did not even look at the body as he continued scanning for more threats. Move them toward the upper levels, Quan ordered. We have secured a route to the docking bays. Dasani watched as the Marines began guiding her people toward safety, their movements efficient and careful despite the obvious urgency of the situation. She saw one of them, a young female with kind eyes visible through her visor, pick up a Mirthi child who was too weak to walk and carry her gently in her arms while still keeping her weapon ready with the other hand. These creatures could kill with terrifying ease, yet they handled the children as if they were made of precious glass. Who are you? Dasani asked the nearest Marine, Sergeant Major Quan Taijin. He replied without looking at her, Earth Defense Fleet, and we received your distress call. You came for us? Now he did look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she did not expect, anger, not at her, but at what had been done to her people. We always come. He said simply, Now, please move with the others, Elder. We still have work to do. Dasani allowed herself to be guided toward the stairs, but she kept watching the humans as they worked. More Marines had arrived, and they were spreading out through the holding area, opening every cell they found and directing the freed prisoners toward safety. And whenever a Veloci guard appeared, they died so quickly that Dasani barely saw it happen. She had heard stories about human Deathworlders, tales of their strength and speed and their capacity for violence that other species could not match, but the stories had not mentioned the other things she saw in them. The rage. It burned behind their eyes, like a fire that would never go out. A fury directed at everyone who had participated in the enslavement of innocent. The beings, these humans had not come merely to rescue the prisoners. They had come to punish the ones responsible. And as Dasani climbed the stairs toward freedom, she heard the sounds of combat intensifying somewhere above them. Moving toward the command center where the overseers waited mercy, she realized was not something these humans intended to offer. The first Veloci escort ship exploded without warning, its hull torn apart by a barrage of kinetic rounds that struck with the force of a dozen meteors. The crew aboard the station had exactly 4 seconds to process what was happening before the second escort met the same fate, its shields failing instantly against weapons designed to punch through armored warships. Secondary Overseer Mechthel was standing on the observation deck when the attack began, and he watched in frozen horror as the third escort attempted to turn toward the threat. It never completed the maneuver. A missile streaked through the void and struck the ship's engine section, triggering a chain reaction that consumed the entire vessel in a ball of blue fire that faded into darkness within moments. "What is attacking us?" someone screamed over the communication channel. But Mechthel already knew the answer. He had seen the silhouette of the attacking ship against the explosion's light, recognized the distinctive angular design that appeared in Veloci intelligence briefings, alongside warnings written in red text. Humans. The Deathworlders from Earth had found them. Mechthel ran toward the command center, his 4 legs carrying him faster than he had moved in years. While alarms blared throughout the station and crew members scrambled to reach their emergency stations, Overseer Kralvex was already at the main console when Mechthel arrived. His scales flushed dark purple with rage and fear as he studied the tactical display. "One ship," Kralvex hissed. "One ship destroyed our entire escort fleet in less than 100 seconds. It is a human destroyer," Mechthel reported. "The Relentless Dawn." "According to our identification systems," Kralvex slammed, his fist against the console hard enough to crack the screen. "Activate the shields and power up all defensive weapons," he ordered. "We will make them pay for this attack." But even as he gave the command, both overseers knew that it was hopeless. Human warships were built by a species that had evolved on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy, a world where everything wanted to kill everything else. And they had designed their weapons accordingly. The station shields flickered to life just as the Relentless Dawn opened fire with its secondary batteries. And Lieutenant Big Jahan watched from his tactical station as the energy readings fluctuated wildly. "Targeting their shield harmonics now," he announced. "Frequency modulation at 17% and climbing." Captain Yu nodded without taking her eyes off the view screen. "Navigator Han, bring us in closer. I want boarding range within 2 minutes." The Relentless Dawn surged forward, closing the distance while its weapons continued to hammer the station's defenses with precise, calculated strikes inside Kethra 7. The lights flickered and sparks erupted from overloaded systems as the shields struggled to maintain coherence against the human assault. "Our shields are failing," a technician reported, his voice cracking with terror. "They are using some kind of harmonic disruption that our systems cannot compensate for." Kralvex grabbed the communication controls and broadcast on all frequencies. "Human vessel. This is Overseer Kralvex of the Veloci Consortium. You are attacking a protected commercial installation, and if you do not withdraw immediately, we will execute the prisoners in our custody." The response was silence. Absolute, complete, terrifying silence. No demands. No negotiations, no threats in return. Just the continued assault on their shields as if Kralvex had said nothing at all. Mechthel felt something cold settle in his chest as he realized what that silence meant. That humans were not here to talk. "Overseer," a security officer called out. "We are detecting multiple launches from the enemy vessel. Small craft heading directly toward our hull." "Boarding pods," Mechthel whispered. "They are sending Marines." Kralvex turned to face the secondary overseer. And for the first time in their long association, Mechthel saw genuine fear in his superior's eyes. "Gather all armed personnel at the main docking sections," Kralvex ordered. "We will stop them at the breach points." But they both knew it would not be enough. Human Marines were legendary throughout the galaxy. Warriors bred on a death world where survival required strength, speed, and a willingness to kill without hesitation. They were the nightmare that kept Veloci commanders awake at night. The reason why smart slavers never operated anywhere near human space. The first boarding pod struck the station's hull with a sound like thunder, and Mechthel felt the vibration through the floor beneath his feet. 3 more impacts followed in rapid succession, each one accompanied by the shriek of metal being torn apart as the pods burned through the station's armor. "They are inside," someone reported unnecessarily in the corridor outside the command center. The first screams began. Sergeant Major Quan Taijin was the first human through the breach, his armor still smoking from the heat of the forced entry as he raised his rifle and scanned for targets. 3 Veloci guards stood at the end of the corridor, their weapons raised but their hands shaking so badly that they could barely aim. Quan fired 3 times in less than 2 seconds, and all 3 guards dropped without ever pulling their triggers. "Corridor clear," he reported over the team channel, moving toward the holding cells. Behind him, more Marines poured through the breach, spreading out into the station with the coordination of a single organism, each team knowing exactly where to go and what to do without needing orders. Corporal Shin Yeonhee followed her team leader down a side passage, her heart pounding in her chest as she checked each door they passed. This was her first slaver operation, but the training had prepared her for what she might find, and she had promised herself that she would not freeze no matter how bad it got. Private First Class Moon Jisoo moved beside her, his designated marksman rifle held ready as his enhanced optics scanned for threats in the dim lighting. "Contact left," he said calmly, and his rifle barked once a Veloci guard who had been hiding in an alcove collapsed without making a sound. They moved on without slowing in the command center. Mechthel listened to the reports coming in from throughout the station, each one worse than the last. The humans were cutting through their security forces like a blade through water, moving with a speed and precision that should have been impossible for biological beings. "They are not stopping," a communications officer said, his voice high with panic. "Nothing we do even slows them down." Kralvex grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and checked. "It's power cell. If we cannot stop them, we will use the prisoners as leverage," he declared. "Order all guards in the holding areas to prepare for immediate execution on my command." Mechthel stared at his superior in disbelief. "You cannot be serious. If we kill the prisoners, the humans will have no reason to hold back." Kralvex laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Look around you. Secondary Overseer, do they look like they are holding back now?" He had a point. The station shook again as another explosion echoed through the corridors, and the tactical display showed human teams converging on the command center from 3 different directions. They were surrounded, outgunned, and out of options, and somewhere in the holding cells below, 400 Mirathi refugees waited to learn if rescue had finally come or if this day would be their last. The signal came through at 0347 hours, broken and weak, repeating the same desperate message over and over again. Chai Minho sat upright in his chair the moment his console lit up with the fragmented transmission, and his fingers moved across the controls to clean up the audio while his heart began to beat faster in his chest. "Help us," the voice said in heavily accented Galactic Common. "They are taking our children. They are putting us in cages, please, anyone? Help us." The intelligence analyst ran the voice through his database and identified the speaker as Mirathi, a species known for their gentle nature and their unfortunate tendency to become targets for slavers across the galaxy. Minho grabbed his communicator and contacted the bridge immediately. "Captain Yoon, you need to hear this right now." Captain Yoon Surin was already awake when the call came through, because she rarely slept more than 4 hours at a time during patrol missions, and she made her way to the intelligence center within 3 minutes of receiving the alert. She listened to the recording twice without saying a word. Her face completely still, her dark eyes revealing nothing of what she felt inside. "Where is this coming from?" she asked. "Kethera 7, Minho replied. "It is a relay station operated by the Veloci Consortium, and according to our intelligence files, there have been rumors of illegal activity there for years, but nobody has ever confirmed anything." The captain nodded slowly and turned to look at the star chart. Displayed on the wall, Kethera 7 was 3 hours away at maximum speed, which meant 3 hours of wondering what was happening to those refugees while the relentless dawn raced through the darkness of space. "Wake Lieutenant Beak and tell him to meet me on the bridge," she ordered, "and send a coded message to Human Space Command, requesting authorization to investigate." The response from Command came back within 20 minutes, which was unusually fast for bureaucratic channels. And it contained only 2 words that made Captain Yoon's jaw tighten. "No witnesses." She had received this order before, twice in her 15 years of service, and both times had involved slavers who preyed on the weak and the helpless. Lieutenant Beek Jiuhuan arrived on the bridge looking like he had not slept at all, which was probably true given his habit of running combat simulations late into the night cycle. "What do we have, Captain?" he asked. "Veloci slavers," she answered. "They have captured a transport vessel carrying Marathi refugees, including children, and they are processing them for sale." Something changed in the lieutenant's eyes. Something cold and hard that most species in the galaxy would not recognize, but that every human understood on an instinctive level. How many hostiles are we expecting? Unknown, but intelligence suggests they usually operate with 3 escort ships and a crew of approximately 200 on the station itself. Beak nodded and began pulling up tactical displays, his mind already working through attack vectors and weapon loadouts. The Veloci use standard shield configurations with a known weakness in the harmonic frequency range, he said. "If we hit them hard and fast, we can destabilize their defenses before they even know we are there." Captain Yoon turned to address the rest of her bridge crew, who had assembled silently during the conversation. "Listen carefully," she said. "What we are about to do is not something we discuss outside this ship. Not with family, not with friends, not with anyone who was not here today." She paused and looked at each of them in turn. "The Veloci Consortium has refused to sign the Sapient Rights Accords, which means they have no legal protection under galactic law when it comes to slavery. And Human Space Command has given us authorization to handle this situation as we see fit." Navigator Han Dokyun spoke up from his station. "Captain, I have plotted a course that will bring us in through the sensor shadow of a nearby asteroid field. And if we time it right, we can emerge at point-blank range before their systems can react." "Do it," Yoon ordered. "All hands, prepare for combat operations. And someone wake up the Marines." The relentless dawn changed course and accelerated to maximum speed, its engines humming with power as it cut through the void toward Kethera 7 in the hours that followed. The crew prepared for what they grimly called a cleansing operation, a term that had originated during the early days of human expansion into the galaxy when they first encountered species that practiced slavery. Humans had a complicated history with the concept of owning other sentient beings, and that history had left deep scars on their collective psyche that had never fully healed. When they discovered that slavery still existed among the stars, something ancient and furious had awakened in the human species. Something that demanded justice for every being in chains, regardless of what planet they came from. Gunner Sergeant Park Yoonji ran final checks on the weapon systems, her movements precise and practiced after years of training and combat experience. She had joined the military after her younger brother was killed by pirates who had tried to capture a human colony ship for the slave markets. and she had dedicated her life to making sure that no one else would suffer the same fate. "All weapons are online and ready," she reported. "Kinetic batteries are loaded with armor-piercing rounds, and the missile tubes are primed for rapid fire." Captain Yoon acknowledged the report and turned her attention to the main view screen, which showed nothing but stars and darkness somewhere out there. 400 Marathi refugees were waiting for rescue, not knowing if anyone had heard their cry for help or if they were destined to spend the rest of their lives as property. The captain thought about the children mentioned in the distress call and felt something twist in her chest. She had a daughter back on Earth, a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and a laugh that could light up any room. And the thought of her being taken by slavers was enough to make Yoon want to tear the galaxy apart with her bare hands. "Captain," Minho said quietly, "we are approaching the drop point." Yoon straightened in her command chair and took a deep breath. "All hands. Battle stations," she announced over the ship-wide comm. "This is not a drill, I repeat. This is not a drill." Throughout the relentless dawn, humans moved with purpose and deadly intent, checking weapons, securing equipment, and preparing themselves mentally for what was to come. The Veloci had no idea what was heading toward them, no concept of what human Deathworlders were capable of when they were angry, and no understanding that the distress signal they had allowed to escape would be their death sentence. As the ship entered silent running mode and powered up its weapons, Captain Yoon spoke one final time. "Remember why we are here," she said. "Remember who we are fighting for. And remember that mercy is reserved for those who deserve it." The bridge fell silent as the relentless dawn emerged from the asteroid field's shadow, its hull dark against the stars, its weapons glowing with barely contained destruction. Cathra 7 appeared on the view screen, a sprawling station surrounded by 3 escort ships that had not yet detected the human vessel approaching from the darkness. "All weapons. Target the escorts first," Yoon commanded, her voice cold and steady. "Fire when ready." The night was about to become very loud,